Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh and today I wanted to cover two things. This is going to be part 2 of a series that I just started doing where I talk about what each of the playable classes in D&D is like to play and what they actually are, what the class fantasy of them is, what your role will be, and so on, as an introduction to new players or people who have just never played these classes in particular. And at the same time, I'll be designing a t-shirt, some merchandise based on each of those classes so that you can embody them if you choose to play them in or out of game as well. So it'll be a time-lapse illustration and an explanation at the same time. These t-shirts will be live on my website, and I'll leave a link down below in the description box where you can find that. And last time we started off with the Wizard, the most iconic spellcasting class in my opinion, and I asked my patrons over on Patreon which class they wanted me to illustrate next, what t-shirt they wanted, and somewhat unsurprisingly I guess, I think a lot of people who engage with D&D content usually are Dungeon Masters themselves, and so they asked if I could do a Dungeon Master t-shirt next. And I think that's a really good idea to talk about what a Dungeon Master's role actually is in D&D for new players as well, because in my opinion, they're the best role to take part in. They're the best thing that you can play in D&D. Not a huge number of people who are just starting out feel the same way. So I wanted to kind of demystify what a Dungeon Master is, and also give a nice reward for all of the people who are Dungeon Masters or have been Dungeon Masters for a while in the form of some merch that you can actually wear as well. But anyway, let's get started with the video and talk about Dungeon Masters. What are they exactly? Usually when I sit down to make my videos, I will heavily research the topic, write a very in-depth script, and then boil that down into bullet point notes so that I know what I want to talk to you about. But at the same time, I'm not constrained and hemmed in by a very wordy script. But every time I sat down to try and do the same thing for this video, to talk about what it is to be a Dungeon Master, I found myself incredibly lacking. There was too much that I wanted to talk about, because this is a subject that's very dear to my heart. It is the root of my obsession with Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing that I wrote seemed adequate, so everything that I'm recording is going to be entirely off the cuff. So I'm sorry if it gets a little bit messy. I'll try and edit it back together in the production phase of this. I am a Dungeon Master. And whereas when you play a class as a player in D&D, you're interested in a particular character, their story arc, what they can do, how they make you feel when you embody them. When you go home at night at the end of the session, or when you complete that campaign with that character in, that's the end of that character. You may love the ranger, the bard, the warlock, what have you, but eventually you doff your armor, hang up your robes, sheathe your swords, and while this game may obsess you, as it tends to, and you may identify incredibly strongly with one of these classes more so than the others, when the adventure ends and when the session ends, it feels natural that your time embodying them also finishes. You go back to your normal life. For the Dungeon Master, at least in my own experience, the same can't really be said. Once you don the mantle of the Dungeon Master, and the full set of rules, the full storytelling equipment is handed to you, your life is changed. You will always view things through the lens of the Dungeon Master. A piece of being the Dungeon Master stays with you forever, as a welcome splinter in the mind. Because I think, as a Dungeon Master, you're given the opportunity to build worlds, and there's something about that power that utterly drives an obsession. Perhaps power's the wrong word for it. Personally, when I think about my life, the thing that gets me most excited is gift giving. There's terminology that I'm new to, that the internet has familiarized me with, which is the idea of a love language. How do you experience or express love? And for me, I express love through the language of gift giving. Being a Dungeon Master, to me, is one of the best gifts that I can possibly give. A Dungeon Master's job is not only to be a storyteller, but an architect, an anthropologist, a fantasy historian, and some sort of storyteller who's going to tailor fit a narrative or perhaps even a whole reality for their closest friends to live in temporarily every week. Initially, the concept of a Dungeon Master was, as the name suggests, someone who creates a dungeon, a sort of adversary who would try and slaughter their friends' characters every week around the dinner table. Their job was to build their perfect dungeon full of deadly traps, monsters, twists, turns, and puzzles to confound and confuse their friends. But ultimately, although the game has changed a lot since then, the same basic premise still holds up. You are creating something for your closest friends to experience. It's a bit like being a game developer. You create the game that you want to see in the world, and you spend so long making it, understanding the underlying mechanics and peering behind the curtain of reality, that it becomes something that you don't necessarily want to be a player in, but your obsession and your drive becomes giving something to the people that you love the most. And it's very likely that that motivation will be something that causes you to think about this every waking second of the day, every piece of media you consume, every book you read, every game you play, every film you watch. Everything becomes an exciting opportunity, and rather than just a cool moment that feels empowering or interesting or tragic, everything becomes a conversation about, oh my god, I can't wait to give this to my players next week. How amazing would this person's character feel in this moment, conquering this moment of triumph, having this moment of upset only as a method by which they can grow and live their best lives. The Dungeon Master's Guide in 5th edition has a little passage on the inside of the first cover that sums up this attitude quite well. It says, with a disclaimer, that Wizards of the Coast does not officially endorse the following tactics, which are guaranteed to maximize your enjoyment as a Dungeon Master. First, always keep a straight face and say, okay, no matter how ludicrous or doomed the player's plan of action is. Second, no matter what happens, pretend that you intended all along for everything to unfold the way it did. Third, if you're not sure what to do next, feign illness, end the session early, and plot your next move. When all else fails, roll a bunch of dice behind your screen, study them for a moment with a look with deep concern mixed with regret. Let loose a heavy sigh, and announce that Tiamat swoops in from the sky and attacks. As a Dungeon Master, you get to build a world from the ground up if you so choose. You get to decide everything that goes into it, from the nations, species, spells, creatures, laws of physics, anything you can imagine, down to its tiniest details, what each individual shop sells, what dangers your players may face, and what allies they may meet on their journeys. And sometimes, I feel like a lot of people feel quite nervous about this role, because, as well as being every single friend that they will ever meet, every interesting NPC, every character, you get to be 1,000 different characters in a single campaign, some of who you can choose to play for longer than others. Ultimately, some people give me the impression that being a Dungeon Master is scary, because there's a lot of pressure to memorize all the rules, and that you'll perhaps be caught out by your players, that you'll feel embarrassed if you don't know something, or ashamed of your lack of knowledge. Fundamentally, as a Dungeon Master, you are a master of all of those rules, and your storytelling is ultimately a performance which is provided to your friends. You make up what happens, whether dice rolls are involved in it or not. You don't have to use any of the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You don't have to use any of the rules in any part of the game. They're all guidelines which are given to you specifically in order to tell the stories that you want to tell. There are no canon rules. There are no logical, absolute rules. So there's nothing to fear by forgetting them. I've been playing this for years and years now, and I don't think I've ever read any book from cover to cover. I get the gist of what I'm interested in, and then use it to tell the stories that I want to, from moment to moment or even on a macro scale. And fundamentally, you are performing this for friends. So even if you are going for every single rule as written, and you are so nervous that you have managed to memorize every single rule in every book, which is definitely not advised, by the way, don't give yourself sleepless nights worrying about being perfect. Because ultimately, I don't think knowing every rule in the book is perfect. But even if this situation did cause you some kind of concern, in this hypothetical situation where you feel like you must know every single rule better than everybody else at the table, despite how ludicrous that is, ultimately, you are giving this story to your friends. And if there's going to be a group of people who will understand how little time you had to prepare the session before, how bad your memory is if you've forgotten something important, if you've screwed up reading your own notes and you've skipped ahead or behind by accident, if you mess up in any capacity, your friends will understand. If they don't, and they're annoyed at you for some reason, you may need to just simply reevaluate who your friends are. There's no reason or need to be embarrassed or nervous about being a Dungeon Master. And you don't need to put any more work into it than being a player if you don't want to, so long as you think you and they will enjoy it. This is the story that you want to tell, whatever your reasons are for telling it, which largely will be for your friends' enjoyment, but it could be for any number of reasons. But fundamentally, in this game, where you are the architect and the storyteller, the judge, jury, and executioner, there is no wrong if you are embarrassed of getting things wrong. But naturally, as this is your performance as well, you should always be looking for opportunities where unpredicted things arise, to enmesh them into your story and pretend like they were intended all along. This is a collaborative storytelling effort. While it's your job to spend countless hours obsessing and writing things for your friends to enjoy, to come up with an interesting plot, an interesting world for them to explore, a sandbox or a linear story, or even just a dungeon for them to smash to pieces, they're not derailing the plot. They are the plot. You write the story, they write the plot, by making their decisions and what their characters would do. So nothing ever truly goes wrong, even if you have to improvise everything. The only time you have to mislead your players and truly lie to them is to give them the satisfaction of thinking that you are overwhelmed, that they have managed to derail something that has taken hours. For some reason, players really love that. And all you need to do to make them feel absolutely amazing is play up to it a little bit. That and pretending to really enjoy killing their characters. As the Dungeon Master, you get to be every single character they're ever going to meet, and that includes a whole host of monsters that you can throw at them, filled with deadly powers and exciting abilities that the players would never get to dream of using. And your ruthlessness and evil smirk when you get to embed a sword in their character's chest after you very clearly fudged a few dice, previously allowing them to live a few more rounds, cements in them a worthy adversary and a powerful plot moment. So this was a total ramble, and I have no idea if I've managed to make my point across this, but I really wanted to embody what I think a Dungeon Master is in this t-shirt. You are the keeper of fate, you are the storyteller, you are the inventor of this world, from its most macro level to its most micro. So I wanted to include an ink pot and 2 quills to show you writing this story, as someone who's going to be constantly writing, as a bit of fun. You are also the architect of fate for your characters, whether that be good or whether that be their ultimate demise, which is why I wanted to include the scythes in here as a counterpoint. You will be the thing that kills their characters if they don't choose to retire them, and you should own that fact. But at the same time, I wanted to show that the Dungeon Master is also playing the game, just as the players are. So often I will ask someone, oh, have you played D&D? And they will say, no, I'm just the Dungeon Master. And I think that's really an unhealthy attitude to have, because as a Dungeon Master, you are the player too, and if you're not enjoying it, you shouldn't be the Dungeon Master. Enjoy your obsession, and if you don't, ask your friends to DM instead. It's incredibly fun, but it can be exhausting, and it's very time consuming. So I wanted to show the dice here to represent the fact that you are also a player, and that ultimately some of your decisions, no matter how hard you write something into the plot, as long as there's a dice roll for it, there is still randomness in this world. You don't get to orchestrate absolutely everything, but you get to set everything up. You are still beholden to the randomness of dice and chance. And in the center, I chose to include a crown, because you are the monarch, the ruler, the last word, and the creator of any laws and rules that you want to have in your game. If you feel like you are being tormented by someone who thinks the rules should operate differently to you, a backseat DM or a rules lawyer who's causing you problems, you are the final word. What you decide goes. You can rewrite any rules on the fly, it's not recommended, but you can, so if you're nervous about being wrong, there is no wrong in the eyes of the Dungeon Master. You are the ultimate authority in the story that you have spent hours writing. Your players get to help you write this world, they get to write their story into it, they get to make their own decisions, but don't be bullied by players. If something seems more cinematic, more interesting, or more fun fundamentally, you have the final say in how it occurs. Not everything has to be a dice roll. You are writing the soap opera that your friends are going to enjoy for years to come and are going to obsess over week after week. So make sure that you enjoy writing it, you enjoy running it, even if you're building it entirely for them. Anyway, I've rambled on for quite a lot, but I want to show you the final design. So I'm actually wearing the Dungeon Master t-shirt right now. I'm not sure if you can see it because I've zoomed myself right in. Sorry, that was a train going past. But I'm wearing the Dungeon Master t-shirt right now. Oh. It arrived the other day, and I was very, very excited. Now, the people who produce my merchandise are a company called T-Mill, and I've chosen them specifically because they have some very strong ethical guidelines that they use throughout the entire practice of making merchandise. They're a very green company. A lot of their gear and their packaging is recycled. It doesn't contain plastics. They use renewable energy. Everyone in this kind of pipeline of people who are producing this stuff are paid fairly. And fundamentally, as a print-on-demand service, they are a company that doesn't produce huge batches of stuff for me that might end up in landfill, even if it's biodegradable. The only time one of these shirts gets made is if you order one, so there's very little waste in this process. I would say no waste, but I don't want to guarantee that. Either way, I'll make sure to leave a link down below to their website where you can find out more about them. But this company seems really in line with my values in terms of not wanting to destroy the planet for the sake of making merchandise, but I do really want to produce stuff. So I feel a little bit less guilty about making merchandise as a YouTuber, and I'm actually really proud of not only the illustrations that I've made, but also using this company. Now on top of that, they do promotions. I'm not in charge of these promotions, but they let us know when they are performing certain things. They have a 1T, 1 tree policy that comes up every now and again, which is when they will plant trees based on how many t-shirts you sell and things. 1T, 1B, which is one where they donate proceeds to helping our dying bee populations, and so on. I'll make sure to notify you whenever those are happening on my Instagram and other social media, but I wanted to post this video today specifically because they're actually doing a promotion where you guys can get a decent amount of savings. As of this weekend, when this video is posted, so I'm sorry if you're watching this later on, but throughout this entire weekend, they're doing a free shipping weekend. So I'll be posting these videos whenever they are doing shipping weekends. That's when I'll update and make a new video, making more merch and things like that, because the profit that I make from these designs never changes. I get between 2 and 3, sometimes £4 on each t-shirt. That doesn't change whether it's a free shipping weekend for me or not, but it does mean that the price goes down for you guys. So I want to make sure that you're not paying the earth for buying this stuff. So this weekend they're doing a free shipping weekend, and I thought I would publish this video now and publish this t-shirt so you can get a copy of it for yourself. Anyway, I've rambled on far enough, so thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for exploring what a DM is, and if you have a class or a role in D&D that you'd really like to see me cover, make sure to leave that down below in the comment section. I'll make sure that my patrons can vote on which design they want to see next. And until next time, happy monster hunting and happy adventures. Bye!